The dusk settled over Crestwood, South Carolina, where the Edisto River wound through a valley of cypress and oak, its waters catching the last light like molten gold. Maple Street, lined with clapboard houses and ancient trees draped in Spanish. Moss was quiet, save for the hum of a police cruiser idling at the corner. Officer Derek Hargrove, 34, leaned against the vehicle, his uniform crisp despite the humidity. A decade on the force had made him a fixture in Crestwood, a town of 8,000 where he saw himself as the gatekeeper of order, his eyes locked on a figure under the streetlights, a young black woman, early 20s, in a denim jacket and sneakers, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She walked with purpose, her steps steady, unbothered by the evening's chill. Derek's jaw tightened. She wasn't local, and in Crestwood, strangers were a problem. He flicked on the cruiser's spotlight, pinning her in its harsh glare. "Let's see what we've got here," he muttered, stepping onto the asphalt. Aisha Monroe didn't flinch when the light hit her. At 23, she'd felt this kind of stare before, on Atlanta's MARTA trains, in mall parking lots, at airport security. Her dark eyes adjusted, catching the officer's silhouette. His badge gleamed, his hand resting on his holster with casual authority. "Evening, miss," Derek said, his southern drawl thick, voice clipped. "Where you headed?" Aisha kept her tone even, her city upbringing a shield against escalation. "Just walking home, officer." "Home? You live around here?" He stepped closer, sizing her up from her braided hair to her worn sneakers. "Staying with family on Oak Street," she said, meeting his gaze. Derek smirked, unconvinced. "Oak Street's a hike from here. Long walk this late. Got ID?" Aisha moved slowly, aware of his hand near his gun, and handed over her driver's license. Derek studied it, frowning at the details. "Aisha Monroe, Atlanta address. You're far from home, Ms. Monroe." "Visiting relatives," she said, her patience thinning but voice steady. "Mind if I check your bag?" It wasn't a question. Aisha unzipped her backpack, revealing a laptop, notebooks, a water bottle, and a folded scarf. Derek rifled through, tossing items onto the sidewalk with deliberate carelessness. Notebooks splayed open, the scarf catching a breeze. "What's all this? You a student or something?" "Something like that," Aisha replied, her jaw tight as she watched her. "Belongings scattered." He snorted, dropping the bag. "Crestwood's a quiet town. We don't like strangers causing problems." Aisha's eyes narrowed, a spark of anger breaking through her calm. "I'm not causing trouble. I'm walking." Derek stepped into her personal space, his voice dropping to a growl. "Don't get smart with me. I've seen your type. Coming into our town, stirring things up, thinking you own the place." Aisha held her ground, heart racing but face composed. "I'm not breaking any laws." "That's for me to decide," he snapped, grabbing her arm, his grip bruising. "You're coming to the station until we sort this out." Aisha's training kicked in. Self-defense classes her father had insisted on since she was 12, drilling her to stay calm under pressure. She twisted her arm free with a fluid motion, stepping back to create distance. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice sharp but controlled, loud enough to carry. Derek's face flushed, anger flaring in his pale blue eyes. Resisting. "Huh? That's a big mistake." He reached for his handcuffs, his posture tense, but headlights interrupted the standoff. A battered pickup truck slowed beside them, its engine rumbling. Clarence Thompson, Aisha's uncle, leaned out the driver's window, his weathered face etched with concern. "Everything okay, officer?" Derek glared, his hand still hovering near his cuffs. "Move along, Clarence. This doesn't concern you." "That's my niece," Clarence said, his voice firm, carrying the weight of a man who'd faced down worse. "She's staying with me. What's the problem?" Derek hesitated, Clarence's presence a complication he hadn't anticipated. "Just a routine check." She was acting suspicious. Clarence's eyes flicked to Aisha's scattered belongings, her laptop open on the ground, pages fluttering. "Don't look routine to me. You got a reason to harass my family?" Derek bristled, his authority challenged. "Watch your tone, Clarence. I'm doing my job." Aisha stepped in, her voice calm but firm, diffusing the rising tension. "Uncle Clarence, it's fine. I'll handle this." She knelt to gather her things, her movements deliberate, meeting Derek's gaze as she stood. "Am I free to go?" With Clarence watching and a neighbor's porch light flicking on across the street, Derek's options narrowed. His jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. "Stay out of trouble, Ms. Monroe." Aisha walked away with her uncle, feeling Derek's stare boring into her back. That encounter was the spark, but the fire it would ignite would burn through Crestwood's foundations, exposing truths long buried. Crestwood sat in a low-country valley, its 8,000 residents split evenly between black and white, a town of contrasts, where old money lived in manicured estates and working-class families crowded into sagging bungalows. Main Street was a postcard. Daisy's Diner, Murphy's Hardware, First National Bank, all framed by American flags and flower boxes. But beneath the charm lay a history of segregation, redlining, and uneasy truces. The police department, 10 officers strong, was mostly white, led by Chief Earl Ramsey, a former football coach who'd mentored Derek since his high school days. Complaints of racial profiling had piled up for years, filed by black residents like Clarence, only to be dismissed for insufficient evidence. Derek was Crestwood's son, raised on stories of its glory days before integration, loyal to an unwritten code that valued order over justice. He saw himself as a guardian, keeping the town safe from outsiders, especially those who didn't look like him. Aisha was no ordinary outsider. She'd arrived 3 days earlier to visit Clarence, a retired mechanic who'd raised her father, Marcus, after his parents died in a car accident. But Crestwood wasn't just a family stop. It was fieldwork. Aisha was a sociology graduate student at Emory University, her thesis dissecting systemic bias in small-town policing. Her advisor, Dr. Naomi Ellis, had pointed her to Crestwood after state records showed a spike in complaints against its department. Excessive force, illegal searches, all swept under the rug. Aisha planned to spend 2 weeks observing, interviewing residents, and building a case for reform. She hadn't expected to become a target herself, but Derek's harassment was a data point, one she'd document with the precision her father had taught her. Marcus, a civil rights attorney who'd passed 3 years ago, had won landmark cases against police unions, his legacy a fire in Aisha's veins. Her mother, Lena, an assistant U.S. attorney in Atlanta, had drilled her in legal strategy, while her godfather, State Senator James Carver, quietly endorsed her research. Aisha's work was funded by a Department of Justice grant to expose police misconduct, a fact Derek couldn't have imagined as he tossed her notebooks to the ground. The Chiu. Next morning, Aisha sat at Clarence's kitchen table, a Formica relic scarred by decades of family meals. Sunlight streamed through the window, glinting off her laptop as she typed notes with quick, deliberate strokes. "That officer last night," she said, glancing at Clarence, who sipped coffee across from her. "He's textbook. Assumed I was a threat without cause, escalated to intimidation. It's exactly what my research is about." Clarence set down his mug, his calloused hands steady, but his eyes heavy with worry. "Derek Hargrove's been trouble since he was a boy. Bullied your daddy in school, pushed him into lockers, called him names I won't repeat. Now he's got a badge and it's made him worse. You need to be careful, Aisha. This town don't take kindly to folks poking around." Aisha's fingers paused on the keyboard, her dark eyes meeting his. "I'm not poking, Uncle Clarence. I'm documenting. If I can prove a pattern, it could force changes. Better training, oversight, maybe even get officers like him fired." Clarence shook his head, his graying hair catching the light. "You're playing with fire. Derek's uncle is Mayor Tom Hargrove, runs this town like his personal kingdom. Chief Ramsey's his old coach, been covering for him since he was throwing touchdowns. They protect their own." Aisha leaned back, processing the web of connections. "That's exactly why this matters. If the system's shielding him, it's broken, and I'm going to expose it." Clarence sighed, a sound heavy with years of watching Crestwood's injustices unfold. "Your daddy always said you were stubborn as a mule. Got that from him, I reckon. Just promise you'll watch your back." Aisha nodded, her resolve unshaken. She opened a secure file, logging Derek's actions, Date, time, location, exact words, even the way his hand lingered near his gun. Marcus had taught her to build cases methodically, to treat every detail as a weapon. His lessons were her armor. Now, across town, Derek stewed at the Crestwood police station, his boots propped on a desk cluttered with coffee cups and incident reports. He vented to Officer Mike Callahan, his partner, a stocky man in his 40s with a buzz cut and a permanent squint. That girl last night, Aisha Monroe, she's trouble. Had an attitude like she's better than us. Mike shrugged, flipping through a report without much interest. Probably just passing through. Why'd you stop her? She was walking alone, late, looked out of place, new face, big city ID, probably up to no good. Mike raised an eyebrow, his skepticism clear. You check her record? Derek nodded, leaning forward. Clean, no warrants, no priors. But she's staying with Clarence Thompson, that old troublemaker. Something's off. Mike laughed, a short bark. Clarence? He's just a grumpy mechanic, fixes my truck when it acts up. Let it go, Derek. You don't need the paperwork. But Derek couldn't let it go. Aisha's defiance, her calm, unflinching stare as she twisted free, gnawed at him, a challenge to his authority in a town where his word was law. He ran her name through every database, social media, voter records, university enrollment. She was a grad student at Emory. No red flags. But the lack of dirt only fueled his suspicion. She's hiding something, he muttered, pulling up. Her Instagram, photos of Atlanta coffee shops, protest marches, a family barbecue. Nothing incriminating, yet everything about her felt like a threat. That evening he drove past Clarence's house on Oak Street, a tidy ranch with a neatly trimmed lawn and a rusty swing set in the yard. Aisha's silhouette moved behind the curtains, and Derek's grip tightened on the steering wheel. You're not slipping away that easy, he said to himself, his mind already turning to how to put her in her place. Aisha's days in Crestwood settled into a disciplined rhythm. Mornings at Clarence's, analyzing data and cross-referencing state complaint records. Afternoons in town, interviewing residents who'd faced the department's bias. She met Mrs. Evelyn Jenkins, a black retiree, at her Clapboard home, where lace curtains framed windows overlooking a garden of roses. Derek roughed me up during a traffic stop 2 years ago, Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice trembling as she poured sweet tea. Said I was reaching for something. I was just getting my registration. Slammed me against the car, cuffed me in front of my grandkids. They cried for hours. Aisha recorded the story, noting the body cam footage had malfunctioned. Oh. Recurring excuse in Crestwood's reports. Later, at the community park, she spoke with Jamal Carter, a high school senior with dreams of law school. Derek followed me home from here last month, Jamal said, kicking at the gravel near the basketball court. Said I matched a suspect's description. I was wearing my school jersey, number 23, clear as day. What suspect looks like that? His bitterness was palpable, and Aisha's recorder captured every word. Each story added weight to her case, but she knew testimony alone wouldn't suffice. She needed something undeniable. Video, documents, a public incident that couldn't be buried. Derek's harassment escalated with chilling precision. On Wednesday, he stopped Aisha outside the Crestwood Public Library, a squat building with a faded mural of the town's founders. He claimed she matched a shoplifting suspect's description, though the vague report he cited mentioned a man. He searched her backpack, scattering her notes across the pavement, his smirk daring her to react. You seem to be everywhere, Ms. Monroe, he said, flipping through her notebook, its pages filled with neat handwriting. What's all this scribbling about? Aisha kept her voice steady, her phone recording from her jacket pocket. Just schoolwork, officer. He tossed the notebook back, pages crumpling. Better keep it that way. On Friday, he confronted her near the park, though she was on foot, citing suspicious loitering as she sat on a bench reviewing her notes. You're making this a habit, officer, Aisha said, her pulse racing but her tone even, the recorder catching his heavy breathing as he leaned close. And you're making yourself a problem. Derek shot back, his face inches from hers. Keep it up, and you'll see what happens in a town like this. Aisha's recordings grew, each clip a brick in the case she was building. She also noticed a pattern. Derek's stops targeted black residents disproportionately, often with pretexts so flimsy they wouldn't hold up in court. Her thesis, once academic, was now a personal mission to dismantle the system he embodied. A new player entered the fray. Travis Boone, Derek's cousin, a deputy in Colleton County, 30 miles away. At 32, Travis was lean, with a shaved head and a temper that had earned him 3 excessive force complaints, all dismissed. He'd grown up with Derek, sharing his view of Crestwood's natural order, where white authority went unquestioned. Derek called him after the library stop, pacing his small living room, its walls adorned with hunting trophies and a Confederate flag magnet on the fridge. "This Monroe girl's a problem," Derek said, his voice low. "She's poking around, asking questions, acting like she runs the place. I need backup." Travis laughed over the phone, his voice raspy from years of smoking. "What's the play, cousin? Scare her off?" "Something like that. She's got no business here, and I'm not letting her make a fool of me." Travis agreed to drive over the next day, bringing 2 off-duty deputies, friends with their own grudges against troublemakers. Derek also leaned on Mike Callahan, who was reluctant but loyal after years of covering for him. "Just keep an eye on her," Derek told Mike at the station, their conversation hushed in the break room. "She's staying with Clarence, probably. Planning something." Mike frowned, stirring his coffee. "You sure you're not blowing this out of proportion? She's just a kid." Derek's eyes flashed, his voice dropping. "You with me or not, Mike?" Mike sighed, nodding, though unease gnawed at him. Derek and Travis's plan was vague but dangerous. Intimidate Aisha until she left town? Maybe. Stage an incident to justify an arrest. They didn't know she was already 10 steps ahead, her every move calculated. Aisha uncovered a critical lead on Thursday when she tracked down Carla Evans, a former Crestwood officer who'd quit 2 years ago under murky circumstances. Carla, a white woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a nervous tic, agreed to meet Aisha at a diner in the next county, far from Crestwood's prying eyes. The diner smelled of fried onions and stale coffee, its booths empty, save for a trucker at the counter. Carla stirred her coffee, her hands unsteady. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek and his crew, they target black folks, especially young men. Illegal stops, rough-ups, planted evidence. I reported it to Ramsey, but he buried it, said it was part of policing. I quit after they threatened my kid, slashed my tires, left a note at my house. Aisha leaned forward, her recorder hidden in her bag. "Why come forward now?" Carla sighed, glancing out the window at the empty parking lot. "Saw you at the town hall on the local news. You're stirring things up, asking questions nobody else dares. Figured you'd know what to do with this." She slid a USB drive across the table, its surface scratched but intact. Internal emails, incident reports, body cam footage they claimed was lost. It's all there, proof Derek's been breaking the law for years. Aisha's pulse quickened as she pocketed the drive, its weight a promise of justice. "Anything else I should know?" Carla's eyes darted to the door, then back to Aisha. "Derek's not alone. His cousin, Travis Boone, is a deputy in Colleton. He's worse, meaner, smarter. They've got a network, not just in Crestwood. Be careful." Aisha nodded, her case now bulletproof, but Carla's warning lingered like a storm cloud. The town hall, held Saturday at the Crestwood Community Center, a peeling brick building with a basketball court out back, was Aisha's next move. The room was packed, black and white residents sitting in uneasy clusters, the air thick with tension. Mayor Tom Hargrove, Derek's uncle, took the podium, a polished man in his 60s with a politician's smile and a tailored suit. He fielded softball questions about potholes, school budgets, and a new stoplight until Aisha stood, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mayor Hargrove, I'm Aisha Monroe, a researcher studying policing in Crestwood. There are documented complaints of racial profiling by your department, including excessive force and illegal searches. What steps are you taking to address this?" The room fell silent, every eye on her. Hargrove's smile tightened, his gaze flicking to Derek, who stood off duty at the back, arms crossed, his face a mask of barely contained rage. "Ms. Monroe," Hargrove said, his voice smooth but edged. "Our officers are trained professionals. We investigate all complaints thoroughly, and I assure you there's no systemic issue." Aisha pressed, her voice steady despite her pounding. "Hart, what about Officer Derek Hargrove? Multiple residents, including myself, report harassment. Will you commit to an independent review of his actions?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd, black residents nodding, white ones shifting uncomfortably. Hargrove's composure held, but his eyes narrowed. "I won't discuss individual officers in a public forum. If you have concerns, file a formal complaint with the department." Aisha sat, her point made, knowing she'd struck a nerve. After the meeting, as residents filed out, Derek cornered her outside, his bulk blocking the path to the parking lot. "You think you can come here and smear my name?" he hissed, his face inches from hers, breath sour with coffee. "This is my town. Keep pushing and you'll regret it." Aisha met his gaze, her voice low but firm. "I'm not going anywhere, officer." She slipped past him, her phone in her jacket pocket recording every word, his threat now part of her arsenal. That night, Aisha met her cousin Malik, a tech consultant who'd driven from Charleston after she texted him about Derek's escalating harassment. They sat at Clarence's dining table, the smell of fried chicken and collards filling the air, the table laden with dishes Clarence had spent the afternoon preparing. Malik, his dreads pulled back, listened to Aisha's recordings, his face growing grimmer with each clip. "This is serious, Aisha," he said, pushing his plate aside. "He's not just harassing you. He's escalating, and he's got backup. You need to take this to someone higher. State police, maybe the DOJ." Aisha shook her head, cutting into her chicken with deliberate care. "I'm close, Malik. I've got his threats on tape, witness statements, and now Carla's USB with internal files. One more piece, something public, undeniable, and I'll have enough to force action." Malik leaned forward, his voice urgent. "You're not just a student here. You're a target. Derek doesn't know who you are, but he's digging. What if he finds out?" Aisha smiled faintly, a glint of defiance in her eyes. "That's the thing. He won't see it coming." Malik didn't know the full extent of her identity, but he trusted her instincts. Aisha wasn't just a grad student. Her father, Marcus, had been a civil rights attorney who'd won landmark cases against police unions, taking on corrupt departments from Birmingham to Baltimore. Her mother, Lena, was an assistant U.S. attorney in Atlanta, a federal prosecutor, with a reputation for dismantling systemic corruption. Aisha's research was funded by a DOJ grant to expose police misconduct, and her godfather, State Senator James Carver, had quietly endorsed her work, opening doors in the state capitol. Derek was harassing the wrong woman, and his mistake would unravel not just his career but the power structure that propped him up. On Sunday, Aisha dug deeper, meeting with a new ally, Reverend Samuel Tate, pastor of Crestwood's First Baptist Church, a hub for the black community. Reverend Tate, a wiry man in his 50s with a voice that could fill a sanctuary, welcomed her into his office, its walls lined with photos of civil rights marches and community barbecues. "I've heard about you, Ms. Monroe," he said, his eyes kind but sharp. "Folks say you're stirring things up, asking about the police. What's your aim?" Aisha laid out her research, her voice steady. "I'm documenting racial bias in the department, Reverend. Derek Hargrove's at the center, but it's bigger than him. Chief Ramsey, Mayor Hargrove, the whole system. I've got evidence, but I need the community's voice to make it stick." Tate nodded, steepling his fingers. "This town's been bleeding for years. Derek stopped my congregants, roughed up kids, planted drugs on a deacon's son last year. We filed complaints, but they go nowhere. What makes you think you can change that?" Aisha slid a copy of her witness list across the desk. Mrs. Jenkins, Jamal, 10 others. These stories, plus internal files from a former officer and video I'm collecting. If we go public, the state can't ignore it. Tate studied her, then smiled faintly. "Your daddy was Marcus Monroe, wasn't he? Fought for us in the 90s. You've got his fire. Aisha's throat tightened, but she nodded. I'm trying to. Tate agreed to rally his congregation, organizing a community forum to amplify her work. But watch yourself, he warned. Derek's got eyes everywhere, and his cousin Travis is meaner than a snake. Travis Boone had arrived in Crestwood that morning, pulling into Derek's driveway in a black SUV with Colleton County plates. The cousins sat on Derek's back porch, beers in hand, the air thick with mosquito repellent and resentment. This Monroe girl's got you rattled, Travis said, his shaved head gleaming in the porch light. Never seen you this worked up over some kid. Derek cracked his knuckles, his face dark. She's not just a kid. She's smart, too smart. Showed up at the town hall, called me out in front of everybody. I need her gone. Travis grinned, his teeth stained from dip. Easy enough. Me and the boys can make it look like she's trouble. Plant something, stage a break-in, whatever you need. Derek hesitated, his loyalty to Crestwood's order warring with the risks. Nothing too crazy, just enough to scare her off. Travis laughed, a cold sound. Scaring's my specialty, but if she's got evidence, we need to move fast. You. Check her place? Derek shook his head. Clarence is always home and she's careful. Gotta catch her alone. Travis drained his beer, crushing the can. Leave that to me. I'll tail her, see where she goes. You handle the station, keep Ramsey off my back. Derek nodded, sealing a pact that would spiral beyond their control. Aisha's next move was bold. A protest outside the Crestwood police station, scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. She spent Monday preparing, meeting with Reverend Tate's congregation at First Baptist, where 30 residents gathered in the church basement, their faces a mix of hope and fear. Mrs. Jenkins spoke first, her voice strong despite her age. Derek Hargrove cuffed me like I was nothing. If this girl's got a way to stop him, I'm in. Jamal, his school jersey swapped for a button-up, added, He's been after me since I was 15. Time he pays. Aisha outlined the plan. A peaceful demonstration with signs demanding accountability, timed to coincide with the evening news cycle. We need numbers, she said, her voice carrying Marcus's cadence. The more of us, the harder it is to ignore. By the meeting's end, 20 pledged to join, with Tate promising to spread the word. Aisha also shared Carla's USB with Malik, who'd stayed in town to help. Back this up, she told him, handing over the drive. If anything happens to me, get it to my mom. Malik frowned, his tech skills already at work encrypting the files. You're scaring me, Aisha. This ain't just research anymore. She met his eyes. It never was. Tuesday's protest drew a larger crowd than Aisha expected. 40 residents, black and a few white allies, gathered outside the station, a squat concrete building with a Confederate monument out front. They held signs, Stop Racial Profiling, Justice for Crestwood, Fire Hargrove. Reverend Tate led a prayer, his voice booming, while Jamal and Mrs. Jenkins passed out water bottles. Aisha stood at the front, megaphone in hand, leading a chant. No justice, no peace. The crowd echoed, their voices carrying down Main Street. Derek was on duty, watching from the station steps, his face a mask of fury. Chief Ramsey stood beside him, muttering, Keep it under control, Derek. Don't give them a show. But Derek's restraint snapped when Aisha called his name. Officer Hargrove, how many more will you harass before you're held accountable? The crowd roared, phones recording. Derek stormed into the group, shoving past Mrs. Jenkins to grab Aisha's arm. You're under arrest for disturbing the peace, he shouted, twisting her wrist hard enough to make her wince. The crowd gasped. Jamal live-streaming to thousands online. Aisha didn't resist, her voice clear. On what grounds? Inciting a riot. Derek cuffed her, the metal biting into her skin, and dragged her toward his cruiser. Mrs. Jenkins yelled, Let her go! Reverend Tate stepped forward, hands raised. She's peaceful, officer. You're proving her point. Derek ignored him, shoving Aisha into the car. She looked at him through the window, her voice steady despite the pain. You're making a mistake, Officer Hargrove. You don't know who I am. He slammed the door, his face red. I know exactly who you are. Trouble. At the station, Derek booked Aisha, charging her with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest, though she'd been compliant. In the holding cell, a concrete box with a flickering bulb, Aisha sat on a metal bench, her mind racing but calm. She made her one phone call to her mother, Lena, using the station's ancient rotary phone. "Mama, it's time," Aisha said, her voice low. "I'm in Crestwood's jail. Hargrove's the one. I've got recordings, witness statements, video from today, and a USB with internal files from a former officer." Lena's voice was steel, a prosecutor's edge honed by years in court. "Stay calm, baby. I'm activating the team. We'll be there in 3 hours with DOJ investigators and state police. You've got this." Aisha hung up, leaning against the cold wall, a faint smile on her lips. Derek had no idea he'd arrested the daughter of a federal prosecutor, goddaughter of a state senator, and a DOJ-backed researcher whose evidence could topple his world. His mistake was about to unravel Crestwood's power structure, but the battle wasn't over yet. Travis, parked outside the station in his SUV, watched the protest disperse, his eyes locked on Clarence as he left with Reverend Tate. He'd tailed Aisha all morning, noting her movements: church, diner, library. When Derek texted about the arrest, Travis saw an opportunity. "She's locked up," he told his deputies, 2 men with buzz cuts and matching smirks. "Let's hit Clarence's place, send a message." That night, they slashed Clarence's tires and spray-painted "Leave" on his garage door, leaving a note under the windshield. "Tell your niece to go home." Clarence found it at dawn, his face grim as he called Aisha, who'd been released on bail by then, thanks to Lena's lawyer. "They're desperate," Aisha said, standing in Clarence's kitchen, the vandalism visible through the window. "That means they're scared." Clarence shook his head. "Or dangerous. Travis ain't like Derek. He's cold, calculates every move." Aisha nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we calculate better." By midnight, the station was a circus. Lena Monroe arrived with 2 DOJ investigators, a state police captain, and a civil rights lawyer, their presence transforming the sleepy precinct into a federal operation. Chief Ramsey met them in the lobby, sweating through his uniform, his usual bluster gone. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. Ms. Monroe was causing a public disturbance. Lena, tall and commanding in a tailored blazer, fixed him with a stare that could cut glass. "Release my daughter. Now." Aisha walked out, cuffs removed, her wrist bruised but her posture unbroken. She met her mother's gaze, a silent exchange of strength. "I'm okay, Mama." Lena turned to Ramsey, her voice low and lethal. "We're opening a federal investigation into your department, starting with Officer Hargrove. We have evidence of racial profiling, excessive force, and civil rights violations, corroborated by internal documents." Derek, standing nearby, went pale, his suspension announced hours later. "This is a setup," he shouted, lunging toward Aisha, only to be restrained by Mike. Aisha handed over her phone and Carla's USB. "Recordings of every interaction, witness statements, video from today, and department files. It's all there." The DOJ team reviewed the evidence overnight, confirming Derek's pattern of misconduct, backed by Carla's emails and footage showing him planting evidence on a black teenager in 2023. The fallout was seismic. Aisha's live-streamed arrest went viral, amassing millions of views and drawing thousands to Crestwood streets in protest. News crews from CNN and MSNBC set up on Main Street, interviewing Mrs. Jenkins, Jamal, and Reverend Tate, whose sermon on justice aired nationally. The DOJ investigation expanded, uncovering a clique of officers, Derek, Mike, 2 others, protected by Ramsey, with Mayor Hargrove's tacit approval. Derek faced federal charges, civil rights violations, false arrest, and evidence tampering. After he tried deleting body cam footage, unaware Aisha's team had backups. Travis was arrested for conspiracy to intimidate witnesses, his vandalism at Clarence's house linked to him through security footage Aisha had installed days earlier. Ramsey resigned, replaced by an interim chief from Columbia, a woman with no ties to Crestwood's old guard. Hargrove lost his re-election bid, his family's influence shattered as voters chose a black councilwoman, Anita Wells, who joined Aisha's protest. Aisha's thesis, published a year later, became a cornerstone of South Carolina's police. Reform legislation mandating body cams, bias training, and community oversight boards. Crestwood's department was restructured, 3 officers fired, 2 prosecuted alongside Derek. Aisha returned to Clarence's porch, watching her younger cousins chase fireflies in the yard. Malik, visiting from Charleston, brought news. Derek's trial starts next month, looking at 12 years, maybe more. Aisha nodded, her eyes on the horizon. He thought he owned this town. Clarence joined them, holding a newspaper with a headline. Crestwood Community Center renamed for Marcus Monroe. Your daddy's legacy lives in you, Clarence said, his voice thick. Aisha smiled, tears glinting. I just wanted to make him proud. Lena called, her voice warm. You changed Crestwood, baby. You changed us all. As fireflies blinked, in the dusk, Aisha felt a weight lift. Derek hadn't known who she was, but now the world did. Crestwood, once fractured, was healing, its future brighter because one woman refused to back down. But the story didn't end there. Aisha's work rippled beyond Crestwood, earning her a fellowship with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, sending her to other small towns, Selma, Ferguson, Flint, to document policing biases. Her research shaped national policy, cited in congressional hearings on police reform. In Crestwood, residents formed a coalition led by Mrs. Jenkins and Jamal, now a law student at Howard. Reverend Tate's church became a hub for voter registration, doubling black turnout in the next election. Carla Evans testified in Derek's trial, her evidence sealing his conviction. Derek, sentenced to 12 years, sat in a federal prison, his badge a memory, his power gone. Travis and his deputies faced shorter sentences, their network dismantled, their texts and emails exposed in court. Mike Callahan, granted immunity for cooperating, left Crestwood in disgrace, unable to meet his neighbor's eyes. A year later, Clarence hosted a barbecue, his backyard filled with laughter, the smell of ribs and cornbread drawing half the neighborhood. Aisha watched her cousins play tag, her laptop closed for once, a rare moment of rest. Malik nudged her, a beer in hand. You ever think about slowing down? You've done enough for 10 lifetimes. She laughed, her braids swaying. Not yet, Malik. Too much work left. Clarence raised a glass, his voice carrying over the chatter. To Marcus, to Aisha, our fighter. The crowd cheered, neighbors and allies who'd stood with her at the protest, their faces reflecting a town transformed. Reverend Tate offered a blessing, his words a bridge between past and future. We've seen darkness, but light prevails when we stand together. Aisha felt her father's presence, his lessons guiding her still. Document everything, trust your instincts, fight for what's right. The Edisto River flowed nearby, its waters reflecting the stars. Crestwood had faced its demons, and Aisha had shown it a better path. The fireflies danced, and for the first time in years, she felt home. But one final thread remained. Months after Derek's conviction, Aisha received an anonymous letter, postmarked from Carleton County. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the words chilling. You won this round, but the fight ain't over. We're watching. Lena, now overseeing the DOJ's broader investigation into regional police networks, traced the letter to a former colleague of Travis's, a deputy with ties to a militia group. It's a loose end, Lena told Aisha over the phone, her voice calm but firm. We're monitoring them. You're safe, but stay sharp. Aisha nodded, filing the letter in her evidence folder, another data point in a war far from won. She returned to her work, her laptop open on Clarence's table, the cursor blinking as she typed. The systems we fight are not singular but networked, rooted in history, yet thriving in silence. Exposure is the first step, but justice demands persistence. Crestwood was a victory, but Aisha knew the road ahead stretched far beyond its borders, into towns and cities where others waited for their spark.